apologise about the fact that I've not shaved. Although a young lady named Charlie said that I looked especially handsome with my beard, which is good. And I'm sure my wife has noticed that as well. So that's good. So the reason I've not shaved is because I'm doing some writing at the moment, and I'm kind of in my caveman season at Starbucks, which doesn't really kind of work. But so I'm not actually speaking very often. But I wanted to come out today because this kind of stuff is really on my heart, and I love the idea of a 20-minute presentation and then a 40-minute collaboration. So I have a really simple idea, and while we're talking about speaking, let me just say this, that I estimate that I spoke, taught, preached the gospel message around about 800 times before I started to speak in churches. So the way I speak has been shaped by that. The way I communicate has been shaped by that. I talk quite often on the streets. I used to street preach when I was a lot younger. Occasionally I would speak in pubs. We had a band, we would do a band presentation, I'd speak in between the songs. Sometimes in like tent crusades, but mainly in schools. So I probably presented about 800 times I worked out the gospel. I spoke before I started to speak in church. And I'm the kind of person who's not convinced that it's working. So I'm the kind of person you don't want on your stage when you're doing a really great meeting about how we're going to change the world, because I'm the guy who's going to go, maybe we will, maybe we won't. I think there needs to be some things that have changed. And Dyson, the guy who invented the vacuum, he said this: a reinvention requires a passionate anger that something does not work. So I want to put to you today that some of the ways that we present are not really working. And I have a straightforward idea, and it's really simple. I want to share in a minute. So I wanted to look very quickly at history, because this word that's kind of going around a lot, and a lot of people have, is it real, is it not real? And if I could put this timeline up, some historians would say we're in this kind of fifth age right now. We're coming out of what's known as the modern age. And I'm not going to this is not a seminar, so I'm not going to teach on this, but here's some of the words that describe the modern age. And then they say things like, we're now in this idea of a postmodern age. In other words, that the way people think, the way people do things has changed or is in the process of changing. Now, I kind of go along with that, because even in the 25 years I've been ministering, in the 25 years I've been working with young people, I've noticed that people are significantly changing in the way they think. And I think there are three things we need to very quickly think about postmodernity. The first is that it is real, I think. And the way we know it's real is when there's real shifts in eras of history, there are certain signs. The way transport works totally changes. The way communication works totally changes. So at the beginning of the modern age, there was a shift in the way people were able to get along in the sea. There was change with the printing press. Nowadays, with the internet and with planes, which is fairly recent in our history, everything is changing. Things become more global. Secondly, postmodernity is not anti-modernity. So it's not anti these things. It's just going beyond, like you would with puberty. You know, you're post-pubescent, aren't you? It doesn't mean you skipped puberty. It meant you went through that and then you grew up a little bit. So in our communication, perhaps we need to grow up a little bit, not reject these things, but realize there's something on the other side of them. Does that make sense? Yeah. Good. Okay, and the last thing is, it's here. It's here and it's now. So most books I've ever read on post-modernity don't really explain post-modernity. They mainly just talk about the problem with modernity. But there's one book that gives 4 values that are emerging in post-modernity. And I want to talk about these 4 values today shortly. Experiential, participatory, imaginal, and connected. I'm going to explain them in a few minutes. Let me just say why I think this is important. If you know anything about me, I work with the Pais project, and we have teams doing schools work. Started in Manchester, grew in England, started to get into places like Germany in the West, and now we're in Asia, Africa, Europe, and North and South America. And yesterday, I actually shed a tear, which is not like me, because I'm dead inside, most people would say. But I did shed a tear because I started to get some pictures come through, some photos, This is a Pais apprentice in Pakistan. She's actually in Islamabad, and she's speaking to some quite young children there. I have other photos of her and others speaking to older students. This is important to me because I know that what happens in places like America and England spread. The way we do youth work, I go to Africa and I see some bad habits from the West in Africa. I love the idea that we could set up, and we just started the first Youth Leadership Academy in Islamabad. I love the idea that we can shape the way youth leadership might be done in that city. That just really appeals to me. So my idea is this, that we need a new habit to retrain our thinking when it comes to how we present our message. So let's look at these 4 words. Firstly, experiential. In the modern world, instructions were given to be executed. In this emerging world, invitations are offered to be experienced. I want to, obviously this is a kind of religious event. Let me show you another religious building. It's called Old Trafford, and it's in Manchester. And this is where Manchester United play. And we got beat yesterday, which is not good. But when you go here, there are seats for the deaf. So you go in there, and there are seats and there are places for people who are disabled. Bizarrely, there are also, I went on the tour here. In fact, a guy who was on Pais now kind of runs the tours for Manchester United. And there's a place where if you're blind, you can go and watch the game, which makes a lot of sense if you're a Liverpool fan or West Ham supporter, but not Manchester United. So when I asked the question, why is that? I said, that's bizarre. He said, yeah, because they want to soak up the atmosphere. They want to experience the atmosphere. More and more young people don't want to be presented to, they want to experience. And I asked the question, how often do I see in youth or any kind of presentations the opportunity for people to experience what we're teaching about? Now, if you came last month, we talked about this concept of going beyond education to experience. This idea that rather than saying to people, come to me, I'm going to educate you, and then hope you go and have an experience of what I just taught, changing it around to come and experience this with me, and along the way, you'll ask me questions, and I'll educate you. So, Paul noticed this when he went to Athens. What Paul realized was when he went to Athens, he realized that the people in Athens knew one true thing, and that was there was a God that they didn't know. And rather than, attacking them for that, he connected in that way. And I think we need to ask the question, I mainly presented to people who didn't know God, 800 times approximately, to people who never heard the Christian message. So I had to start from what they had experienced that was true. There's an interesting, I won't go through this or teach on this because this is just a 20-minute overview idea, but there's an interesting thought about our presentations. What's going out? Now, I don't like this idea of out and in. I prefer the idea of okay and beyond. There's something better than the ones at the top. But you've got things like presentation as a sales pitch, as conquest, as warfare, as ultimatum, as threat, as proof, as argument, as entertainment, as show, as monologue, as something you do to people. I'm doing a presentation to you. The good thing is later on, we're going to do a presentation together, in one sense. In a presentation as conversation, as friendship, as influence, as invitation, as companionship, as challenge, I think this is a key word, as opportunity, as conversation, as dance, as something you do with people. If you were to take the last presentation you did, how could you make it experiential? How could you give people then and there an opportunity to experience what you're teaching? Participatory. In the modern world, opportunities are presented to be performed. In this emerging world, people are encouraged to participate. It's a little bit like going for a meal. I like buffets. I like buffets a lot. I like buffets too much. But the buffet is different, isn't it? If you go for a normal meal, you're told, you're sat down somewhere, you're given a set menu, you're told in what order you're going to receive this food. You're maybe given some choices, but it's linear. A buffet is different. You can go, you can take a piece here, you can take a piece here, you can take a piece here. It's how education is done now. You know, my sons from the first generation that watched less TV than the generation before them. Because when they came home from school, they didn't go onto the TV. They went upstairs, went into their room, went on the house computer, and they became these world-class researchers. And they learnt things in that kind of buffet style. But we don't often present that way. We don't often allow people to learn that way. We're still connected into this modern way, which still works, but there's just something better of presenting. How could we allow people to participate in what we're teaching? I love this illustration. I like TED. The idea of the 20-minute presentation is based on the TED conference. What's amazing about this conference is the cheapest seat I've ever found, the cheapest ticket I've ever found to this conference was $5,000. And yet at the same time, every single presentation that is shown or done is free on the internet a few weeks later. So why do people go? It's not for the presentation, it's for the collaboration. It's for the participation. It's for the conversations afterwards and the chance to ask questions and be involved in the workshops. That's why people pay so much money. How do you, when you think about your last presentation, how would you make it more participatory? Last time, and this is where things, as Rob said, begin to overlap, we looked at this idea of how many relationships there are in a room and that we need to move from one to many to many to many. How do we allow people to participate in the message, in your message, in what you're trying to share? How do you do that? Let me give you 4 very quick tips. First of all, to make this work, you need to give people a purpose. Otherwise, people just go on random discussions. Secondly, you need to give apparatus. You need to give people a tool to use. The third thing you need to do is provide a spotlight. So when somebody has a great idea or when somebody does something that works, a spotlight is shone upon them. That's what YouTube does. It gives people apparatus, and if somebody does something well, it goes viral and there's a spotlight upon them. And fourthly, perhaps most importantly, we need to give people permission. When I started youth work, particularly in America, the thing that really surprised me was that young people literally could not ask questions. They just didn't seem to know how to ask questions. It was bizarre. I'm like, and it was almost as though they were told you could never doubt. Aristotle said something quite interesting. Aristotle said, the mind never thinks without a question. Which brings us on quickly to the third section. Imaginal. In the modern world, images were used to present answers. In this emerging world, images are required to provoke questions. So this is modern. I'm using a picture to present an answer. What I like to do more and more, however, is use pictures to present questions. If I talk about vision or faith or gifting, I talk about these guys and talk about how inspiring this photo is to many people, that they're living this incredible height of faith and yet they're doing something quite natural to them. They're eating sandwiches. And I like to ask the question, what could you do that is natural to you, but at such a height of faith, it would inspire others? Using images to ask questions rather than simply give answers. How would you have done that in the last presentation you did? And then lastly, connected. In the modern world, consumption has driven individualism. In this emerging world, connectivity has reshaped the way we buy things. It's reshaped consumerism. This is an interesting picture I found on the internet a few years ago. These guys are from a particular university and they're protesting. A couple of interesting things about this picture. The first is that this community, or this college, is for the deaf. So these young men are deaf. And they're protesting. They're actually trying to get somebody fired. They're trying to get the principal fired. I can't remember if they were successful or not. And the reason they wanted to get the principal fired was that the principal of this college was in favour of technology to help newborn deaf children hear. Now understand what I'm saying. They were trying to get her fired because the principal of the college for the deaf was in favour of newborn children being given technology to help them hear. And what they said, their premise was this, that the deaf community is so strong, what we get from this sense of connection is more valuable than the ability to hear. It's incredible. But connection is incredibly important to young people. I remember, because I'm old, when the internet first came out, it was, they'd be on the computers on their room, they'll never talk to anybody ever again, they'll never speak to anybody. I found that exactly the opposite with my sons, that constantly talking to people, they want to be connected, they want to participate, they want to discuss things, they want to connect with each other. How do we do this? How do we move on from these things? Couple of quick thoughts on this. This is where I used to live. You can see the IKEA curtains. Okay, this is where I used to live. And one day, one Sunday morning, I came out, and this is literally, I walked out of my door, which is there, into a no-go zone. I was in the middle of it. We were the only house in the middle of this police zone. A young boy just further up the street had been purposely run over by somebody who'd just come out of a pub. They'd steered onto the pavement to kill this young boy. And over the next few days, young people essentially set up a shrine to this young boy. This happened within a day. And they literally camped out every single night they were there. We used to take out soup to them. They often didn't want it, but they were there for days and days and days. They weren't religious, but it was like a religious event. And there was something connecting. There was something they were looking for, something to be connected to. What's interesting about this is in medieval times, before even modernism, you would go to somebody's funeral and people would lay flowers, and they would just throw flowers onto this communal pile of flowers, if you like. It's a similar kind of thing in the modern age, except what's different is every flower is individually wrapped. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves, but we still want to retain our individualism. And then more and more what happens is, as people start to bring over, and you don't see it here in this picture, but people start to bring football shirts and things that reminded them of this person or their connection to him. So young people especially want to be connected to something, but they want to be able to express themselves as an individual, and in their expression is where they find their individualism. Does that make sense? How do we open ourselves? How do we rewire our thinking to allow that to be part of our presentation? If you want to find out more about this stuff, that's my Twitter and Facebook feed. But my idea for today is this, that we need a new habit to retrain our thinking when it comes to presentation. Because I'm old, I've had to purposely rethink things. And I have to literally purposely, intentionally think, how do I put this into my presentation? Eventually it becomes natural, but it doesn't happen naturally. It happens because you force yourself. So we want to conduct an experiment, if you like, and in a second Karen is going to come out and share that experiment. I've gone through 4 things very quickly, just to say that we have a Pais Livewire, which is a series of 4 videos on those 4 subjects. So if you're interested in them, you've maybe not heard about them, you'd like to refresh your memory, then see myself or see Rob or Karen later and we can point you to them. Secondly, if you want to ask the questions on, because we talked about presentation, but there's lots of different areas to think about E.P.I.C. One of them is Bible study. So if you've not already seen this is the book I wrote on E.P.I.C. and how to apply that, if you like, to Bible study, to rethink Bible study and how we help students connect with the Bible. So this is a way that people can connect with the Bible in an experiential, participatory, image-driven and connected way. So $9.99, it's called Havarim by myself. So see that. Thank you for listening, and Karen's going to come out now to talk about the creative collaboration.